All right, guys, so we have some absolutely horrifying updates coming out of Gaza and Lebanon right now. So I want to go ahead and start off with this Guardian article. Their headline is Palestinians will not be allowed to return to their homes in northern Gaza, according to the IDF. Now, we're going to get into some of the details here, but I don't really know how you interpret this other than it's an open admission that their strategy in North Gaza is a full-blown ethnic cleansing. So here were some of the details. They say Israeli ground forces are getting closer to, quote, the complete evacuation of northern Gaza, and residents will not be allowed to return home, the Israeli Defense Forces has said, in what appears to be the first official acknowledgement from Israel that it is systemically removing Palestinians from the area. They say in a media briefing on Tuesday night, the IDF Brigadier General Itzik Cohen told Israeli reporters that since troops had been forced to enter some areas twice, such as in Jabalia, there is no intention of allowing the residents of the northern Gaza Strip to return to their homes. He added that humanitarian aid would be allowed to regularly enter the south of the territory, but not in the north, since there are, quote, no more civilians left. They also say that international humanitarian law experts have said that such actions would amount to war crimes of forcible transfer and the use of food as a weapon. Now, both of these things I think are indisputable at this point. You are, by the threat of violence, forcing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to flee a given area, again, under the threat of violence, and you are essentially imposing a complete siege, cutting off medical supplies, food, water, electricity, etc., while you continue to bomb and you continue to do raids on hospitals, on schools, on, shelters, on whatever the case may be. It's hard to escape these allegations of war crimes here from the international community. I think that that is an entirely accurate accusation that's being made there. Now, in terms of there are no more civilians left inside of North Gaza, this is based on what I've read over the last couple of days and weeks as this general's plan, as it's being called, has been unfolding, is completely false. Okay, the idea that there are no more civilians left in the north of Gaza is not backed by evidence. Okay, there are likely tens of thousands of people, civilians, who are left inside of the north of Gaza, who are being completely starved of any sort of food or water or resources that they need to survive, and who are being relentlessly attacked amidst this genocidal campaign. Now, they continue down here. They say it is unclear how many people remain in North Gaza. Last month, the United Nations estimated that there were about 400,000 civilians unable or unwilling to follow Israeli evacuation orders. So again, the claim that all civilians have been evacuated from North Gaza seems to be false at face value, right? Now, the disturbing implication of this is that if there are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of civilians who remain in North Gaza, while the IDF is claiming that there are no civilians in Gaza, obviously the implications of that is that they are going to treat any one of these tens or hundreds of thousands of people who remain as combatants, right, as fair targets for them. Now they continue, they say on Wednesday, social media footage showed waves of several dozen displaced people carrying children and rucksacks and walking through the flattened areas of Gaza City. Further down, they say that resettling or permanently reoccupying Gaza is not official Israeli policy, but senior Israeli defense officials recently told the Israeli daily Haaretz that with no other alternatives on the table, the government is aiming to annex large parts of the territory. So if you had said that the Israeli government's goal inside of Gaza was to ethnically cleanse and then annex portions of Gaza, if you were to say that, in November or December of 2023, after the October 7th attacks, you would have been called a conspiracy theorist, right? Now, here we have, again, basically an open admission that, yeah, by default, that's sort of the plan, is ethnic cleansing and then annexation or permanent occupation or resettlement of this territory. They continue. They say Israel's new war, moving on to Lebanon here, with the powerful Shia Lebanese group Hezbollah, now in its second month, also shows no sign of slowing or stopping. At least 30 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a residential building in Barjah near Beirut on Tuesday night, with rescue efforts continuing into Wednesday. Many of those killed were women and children. Surprise, surprise, exactly how this has been defined over the last year of the genocide in Gaza. Mostly women and children have been killed. More on that here in a minute. This is according to Mahmoud Saif al-Din, a local municipality employee. And he continues saying that this was a civilian building in Lebanon in a civilian neighborhood. There were no indications of anything to do with Hezbollah or weapons. We don't know why they struck. What we saw were women, children, and civilians that were killed, which again is exactly what we have been seeing in Gaza for the last year plus straight. Now, we also had here, it's posted by Asal Rod, this absolute ghoul here from the State Department, Matthew Miller, answering some questions from Saeed Arakat. And I'm not going to play the entire clip for you guys because it's like, a few minutes long. It's like 2.5 minutes long, but this gets to the gist of it here, right? So Saeed says, Beit Lahia is being ethnically cleansed. And Miller responds saying, you're referring to the so-called general's plan. Israel says that it's not their plan. Saeed responds saying, you don't observe yourself that what is happening is ethnic cleansing. And Miller responds, the government of Israel can speak for itself. This basically tells you everything that you need to know. The government of Israel can speak for itself. This is what we have seen time and time again. Whenever Israel, does a massacre of civilians, whenever they bomb a residential building or a school or a mosque or a church or whatever the case may be, a hospital, the go-to response from the U.S. State Department, from the U.S. propaganda ministry, if you will, is to say, well, Israel can speak for themselves. They're going to do their own investigations. They'll get back to you, right? We, as the government that is funding a vast majority of this genocide, have nothing to say about this, right? Talk to Israel about why they are ethnically cleansing entire regions of Gaza. Just ask them, right? Oh, they say they're not implementing this so-called general's plan. So how dare you ask about that, right? They've told us they're not implementing this, even though all of the indications on the ground as to what their actions are indicate that they are implementing this plan of ethnic cleansing for the north of Gaza. Ignore what they're actually doing on the ground. Ignore their own statements inside of Israel. Just take whatever they say to the U.S. State Department at face value and don't ask further questions. Seems to be the go-to response there. Now, we also had some further reporting here from the BBC in terms of the amount of women and children that have been killed as a result of this genocide in Gaza. Nearly 70% of the war dead are women and children. Guys, this is not normal. No matter how many Western media, propagandists or pundits or U.S. politicians or whatever the case may be try to portray this as a normal war, and this is the unfortunate result of a war, this is not normal. That 70% of the people you are killing are women and children. Now, it's important to point out that, Israel doesn't get a free pass at killing civilian men, right? It's a useful number to understand how many women and children have been killed, because you can't have that knee-jerk defense of saying, well, if you include the amount of men who have been killed, then, you could argue, oh, well, what if they were members of Hamas or militants or whatever the case may be? It's useful in the sense that if it's 70% women and children, it should give you an idea of the kinds of targets that they are going after. But it doesn't excuse the fact that even though 70% of the people they've killed have been women and children, you could add on to that, 15, 20% that have been innocent civilian men as well. So in general, wouldn't be surprised if by the time we get to the end of this genocide, with the U.S. government doing absolutely nothing to prevent it, we could end up with a 90+% civilian death rate as a result of this. And they want you to interpret that this is a normal part of war. This is not normal. None of this should be allowed to be normalized. Now, we continue just to give you some imagery here in terms of what Gaza looks like right now. So this is sort of a drive-by shot of a northern portion of Gaza here. Now, I have this sped up here, 2x speed, to try to get the entirety of it. I mean, this is a 2-minute and 20-second video driving on the coast of Gaza, where you can see the extent of the destruction here. I mean, to describe this as apocalyptic might be an understatement. That actually might be an understatement. I mean, within the view of this video that's being taken by these aid organization workers, there is not a single fully intact standing structure in sight. Everything has been destroyed. Everything has been destroyed in the north of Gaza. And this is, by the way, this is video that is being taken as Israel is ramping up their offensive in the north of Gaza, right? They claim we want to get all of these civilians out of the north of Gaza so that, what exactly? So that you can turn it into a literal parking lot, so that not only have you destroyed all of the civilian infrastructure inside of the north of Gaza, but you've literally flattened it to the ground. Like, you look at imagery like this, what more could you possibly ask for in terms of destruction? It doesn't really get worse than this, right? Now, we also have this here from Yunus Terari, doing great work covering the day-to-day on what is happening in Lebanon as well as Gaza. So he translated this video here of the Chief Staff Officer Colonel Moshe Sofi and Brigade General Yehuda Vash from the 252nd Division who created a 7x7 kilometer death zone in the heart of Gaza. And their quote here is, "There is not a single building standing here. It looks like destruction on a biblical scale." And watching this video, you know, not hard to see exactly what they're talking about. Let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this.
כך זה נראה מפרוזדור בארי. שמו הישן והמוכר יותר, ציר נצרים. אפשר לראות כאן חלק מהמוצבים שכבר הקמנו בדרך, רואים שם מגופים וסוללות. יש בהם משטחים, תנאים טובים, עמדות מיגון טובות לחיילים. וגם את הצירים, עד כמה שאפשר, אנחנו שיפרנו לטובת הניהול של לוגיסטיקה פנימה. רצועה שרוחבה כ2.5 קילומטרים, שחצתה את רצועת עזה ממזרח למערב עד הים, עובדה 252 בפיקודו של תת-אלוף יהודה וח, הביאה הישג דרמטי. הרחיבה את הציר לכ7 קילומטרים מצפון עד הדרום, בפאתי שכונות סג'איה וזייתון בצפון.
So again, you can see, you know, how little they give a shit about this. Directly asked about, do you have any sort of pangs of consciousness or conscientiousness about this? And he says they brought it on themselves, right? They brought it on themselves. Looking at this, you know, mass wave of endless destruction inside of Gaza. And he blames the Palestinian population there for the destruction that Israel has wrought. Now, we also have in the West Bank continued escalations and attacks from Israeli settlers. So here from Dropsite News, that is a great follow on Twitter if you guys want to get daily updates on what's happening in the region. They say here, West Bank arson attack in Al-Bareh, Ramallah. Earlier this morning, Israeli settlers conducted a large-scale arson attack in the Jabal al-Tawil area of Al-Bareh near Ramallah. Witnesses reported that around 10 settlers poured flammable liquid on approximately 20 Palestinian-owned cars and then ignited them, also targeting a nearby building. When local Palestinians attended to intervene, the armed settlers began shooting at them and an ambulance that arrived on the scene. Palestinian authorities describe the situation as a narrowly avoided massacre. They also say that Israeli security forces have announced that they are investigating the incident. I'm sure that they will do an impartial and full and thorough investigation into themselves and hold themselves accountable. Right now, this is a video here of what the aftermath looked like. You can see some of these cars in the West Bank that are being lit on fire by Israeli settlers. Now, I mean, again, guys, this is the West Bank. This is the West Bank. This is not in Gaza. This is not in an active firefight with Hamas or whatever the case may be. These are Israeli settlers who are lighting Palestinian civilian cars on fire as a part of their continued slow-rolling ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in the West Bank. That's what this is, right? There's no two ways about it. And this is a perfect insight into the broader Israeli Zionist project and what it plans to do with Palestinians, right? In Gaza, we just covered the story of how they're not allowing Palestinians to, even in the immediate foreseeable future, return to their homes in the north of Gaza, and that they have annexation plans. So the plan in both Gaza and in the West Bank is continued displacement. It is violent displacement of thousands and thousands of people from their homes to expand this Zionist Israeli settler colonial project. That's what this is. I mean, you literally have settlers who are setting Palestinian cars on fire. And this is just one example that was on the verge of becoming sort of a historic incident here. But this is the day-to-day violence that Palestinians are subjected to, right? Whether it's their crops or their olives being set on fire by Israeli settlers backed up by the IDF, or whether they're being forced from their homes directly or their homes are being bulldozed, whatever the case may be, this is a day-to-day experience of terrorism that Palestinians are subjected to and are then sort of just expected to go along with, right? You shouldn't have any response to this. Let's allow the Israelis to investigate themselves and to hold themselves accountable for violations of even their own laws in many of these instances. Palestinians are expected to sit back and do nothing. To sit back and do nothing. To peacefully be ethnically cleansed from their lands. That's what we're witnessing here. And so the point that I'm trying to make there is that if you don't address things like this, the escalation of violence and displacement in the West Bank, then you are never going to get any sort of lasting solution here. Whether or not Hamas is destroyed or Hezbollah is destroyed, if this is the continued status quo, there will never be peace. There will never be peace. You cannot keep people under occupation and apartheid and ethnic cleansing and genocide year after year after year and expect that that is going to lead to some sort of a peaceful resolution, right? Now we continue, because this is one of the most alarming articles that I've seen in a long time here, posted by the Associated Press, and credit to them for posting this article. The headline is Takeaways from the AP's report on 3 hospitals in northern Gaza that have been raided by Israeli troops. And if we get into some of the details here, I mean, lots of it is absolutely horrifying at face value. I'll just read you one example. So the 3 hospitals that they cover here are the Al-Adha Hospital in Gaza, the Indonesia Hospital, and the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza as well. Now, the main focus of this article is trying to investigate, as Israel is continuing to attack hospitals inside of Gaza, as they have obliterated basically the entire healthcare system there, are there claims, the Israeli claims of, necessity to attack these hospitals because there are Hamas militants there or because it has some sort of a military justification? Are those claims valid? Are they backed up by evidence? Are they truthful? And in this article, I'll link it down below in the description if you want to read the entirety of it, but you go case by case by case, and what you see here is that the Israeli military never provides any evidence whatsoever that the hospitals that they are attacking are some sort of militant base for Hamas. Right? So here's just one example from the Al-Adha Hospital inside of North Gaza. They say the Israeli military has never made any claims of a Hamas presence at Al-Adha Hospital. So in this circumstance, they didn't even bother claiming that we're attacking this hospital because we know that Hamas militants are stationed inside of it and we have no other choice but to obliterate this hospital. In this circumstance, they didn't even claim that there was Hamas presence there. They just attacked it over and over again. They say, when asked what intelligence led troops to besiege and raid the hospital last year, the military spokesoffice did not reply. They say, as fighting raged around the hospital, a shell blasted its operating room on November 22nd, killing 3 doctors and a relative of a patient, according to the international charity Doctors Without Borders. They say after troops surrounded the facility, the staff said approaching the hospital could be deadly because of Israeli sniper fire, sniping people who are trying to go to the hospital for care. 3 hospital administrators said that 2 pregnant women walking to the facility to give birth were shot on December 12th and bled to death in the street. Medics told of recovering their bodies later. Is this self-defense to you guys? Does this sound like a targeted operation against Hamas militants? They shot 2 pregnant women who were trying to go to this facility because they were giving birth. They were shot by Israeli snipers. They say that Mohammed Salha, an administrator at the time who is now at the hospital's acting director, said that the next day he watched gunfire kill his cousin and her 6-year-old son as she brought the boy for treatment of wounds. Another pregnant woman, Shaza al-Sharim, described walking to the hospital while in labor, accompanied by her mother-in-law and brother-in-law. Even as they wave white flags, a burst of gunfire killed her mother-in-law. Pregnant women being escorted by people waving white flags, and even that is targeted by the IDF. They say the hospital's director, Ahmed Mohana, was seized by Israeli troops after they stormed the facility. His whereabouts remain unknown. Obviously, we've covered the extensive torture network that Israel has set up for Palestinians that they take from Gaza. They say one of Gaza's leading doctors, the orthopedist Adnan al-Bursh, was also detained during the raid and then later died in Israeli custody. So this is just one example. And keep in mind, guys, I've shown you some of the pretty egregious headlines from the Associated Press and other Western media outlets in covering Gaza and Lebanon. So this is not an anti-Israel biased outlet. This is them doing their best to investigate the claims that are made by Israel and how that lines up to their actions on the ground inside of Gaza. There is not a single lick of evidence to say that the attacks on this hospital were justified from the IDF, that the military necessity outweighed the civilian cost in attacking this hospital. And you have testimonies here, multiple instances, separate instances of pregnant women who are attacked by Israeli bullets as they are trying to go to this hospital to deliver their babies. There is no way around this, guys. There is no other interpretation. There is no analysis here that points to a self-defense operation. This is a genocidal operation. That's what this looked like, right? And then you have on top of that, you know, as they point out in this article, and I've talked about this in previous videos as well, of doctors, patients, medics, ambulance workers being kidnapped, abducted from Gaza and taken to who knows where. Many of them, as this instance that we just covered here, you know, end up dying in Israeli custody, tortured to death. This is nothing new. This is what we've been talking about for the last year straight. But this is what we continue to allow to happen on a daily basis inside of Gaza. And again, that was just one hospital. They have several other hospital examples here in this article. I do recommend you guys go and read the rest of it because it's just as alarming as the thing that we just read. But again, this is nothing new. This is sort of just the IDF strategy, right? And not only is it applying inside of Gaza, but it's also applying inside of Lebanon. I mean, this was an investigation that I'll link below, put out on Christiane Amanpour's network here on CNN, where they basically show that Israel is doing the exact same thing that we just discussed with the hospitals in Gaza now to the hospitals inside of Lebanon as they continue their invasion here. And, you know, it's the same shit. It's the same exact shit. Oh, these hospitals are controlled by Hezbollah militants. We have no other options but to obliterate the healthcare system. It's the same shit. It's happening again. I mean, this time in Lebanon. And it's just, it's amazing to me that people still buy into this. Now, we continue. We also have videos here from South Lebanon, also posted by Yunus Tarawi. This is the auxiliary company of the 7016 Battalion throwing Molotov cocktails on civilian properties in a village in South Lebanon. We can go ahead and watch a little bit of this video here with some captions at the bottom. We also have at the same time some further video here of the widespread destruction and what looks to me at least like a a rigged explosive here of essentially an entire neighborhood inside of Lebanon. Let's go ahead and watch this video here. So you can see all of these buildings explode simultaneously, giving you the indication that this was a controlled demolition here, meaning that this was not as a part of an active firefight with Hezbollah militants. They had the time to go into every one of these homes and to rig them with explosives and then to detonate them from far away and to take videos of it. So, I mean, guys, look at a video like this. Look at this. I mean, does this look like a targeted operation? What does this look like to you guys, right? I'm at this point, I don't know how anybody who is actually kept up with Israel's strategy inside of Gaza and Israel's strategy inside of South Lebanon, I don't know how anybody could reasonably or honestly come away with the conclusion that they are fighting against militants. They are not. This is not what it looks like to fight against militants who are, sort of baked in to any given area. This is what it looks like to engage in the intentional, widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure as a sort of collective punishment campaign. That's what this looks like. I mean, these are controlled demolitions, guys, of entire fucking neighborhoods. Look at this. Does this look like a targeted airstrike against a Hamas militant or a Hezbollah militant in this instant? Is that what this looks like? Does this look like, the targeting of Hezbollah weaponry inside of South Lebanon? Or does this look like, which is what it is, the destruction of an entire neighborhood? That's what it looks like to me. Now, finishing off here, we also had Netanyahu using the election as sort of a cover to basically, pull out the knives and stab some of his closest advisors. So here we have Netanyahu firing the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant after months of clashes over war and politics. And according to Barak Ravid here, basically the three main reasons that Netanyahu decided to fire his defense minister was because of his opposition to a law that will exempt, I believe he meant to say exempt here instead of accept, that will exempt ultra-Orthodox men from military service, as well as his support for a Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal, as well as his call for a commission of inquiry for the October 7th failures. So, listen, guys, I might have a separate video on this today or tomorrow, but Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli military, the most hard-right factions inside of Israel, are celebrating this Trump win, right? And I think some part of Benjamin Netanyahu's strategy over the last number of months has been betting on Trump winning this election, right? Not that Joe Biden and Kamala haven't given him basically everything he could possibly ask for outside of like mild rhetorical critiques of what they are doing and how many civilians are dying. But at the end of the day, Benjamin Netanyahu wanted Donald Trump to win. And now that Trump has won this election and that he will be taking power in January, all that Benjamin Netanyahu needs to do at this point is to stall and to create time for himself. And now he feels emboldened, I think largely because of the distraction of the U.S. election as well as the election of Donald Trump, that he can sort of get away with whatever he wants. And so he can fire people like Yoav Gallant. And it's not like Yoav Gallant is some dove, okay? Don't get me wrong. It's not as if he was pushing for peace and he was so appalled by Netanyahu's actions against Palestinian civilians. Of course not. But this shows you that Netanyahu feels more emboldened than ever after the relentless support under the Biden administration and now the election of Donald Trump. Netanyahu knows that he is going to be able to get away with literally whatever he wants inside of Israel, inside of Gaza, inside of the West Bank. And I mean, keep in mind, I've covered previous stories of Trump taking, $100 million from Miriam Adelson, for example, in exchange, as the reports go, for him allowing Israel to annex the entirety of the West Bank. Wouldn't be surprised if that also applies to Gaza. So, times are not looking good right now. I wish that I could tell you guys that I have some good news on the table and that we're on the verge of a ceasefire or some end to this mass slaughter, but it unfortunately doesn't look like that's what's on the table right now. And if anything, given the outcome of this election, given what it looks like Benjamin Netanyahu, has his eyes set on, if anything, it seems like we're heading in the wrong direction as we continue. I mean, we are over a year into this genocide in Gaza. The violence in the West Bank continues, if not is continuing to escalate, and the invasion of Lebanon continues and continues to escalate. And the U.S. government at this point is just totally unwilling to do anything about it.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying